CRA, Teachers at CRA's channel, and welcome once again. Well, it's been a while. It's been a month, but I'm back again. And I had planned last month, which was Black History Month, to share some books that I read when I was a young person. My first exposure to African American literature, okay? We had a few books by Black writers when I was growing up, but we didn't have a lot of them, okay? We had a few here scattered around the house. Back then, it was hard to get access to books, unlike now where you can, get them on Amazon and all these other online places and used online book websites and Barnes & Noble and all over the place. You can read on Internet Archive. But back then, not as easy, okay? And also, the public library here did not have too many books, mostly books by either white American writers or British writers, maybe a few Russian classics like War and Peace. But things have changed, and for the better. Last month was Black History Month, as I said, and I had planned to do a video, but I was really busy. And, I go through periods when I feel like, hey, I don't think I'm going to keep the channel going. But I've decided I'm going to keep the channel going and try to make videos when I can. So I won't have a regular schedule the way things are going, because I've sort of moved into a different phase in my life as both an educator and also a person who writes. And I will share more about that maybe in another video in this year, okay? But I'm not going to go much into it. But things have changed, and one of my dreams came true in the area of writing. But that's another story that I will save for later. But yes, I did not have much exposure to African American writers growing up. And last month was Black History Month, and I encourage people to read their heritage. I encourage African American people to read their heritage, to read our heritage, okay? And also read books all over the place. Read globally. Don't just stay within your own group, but learn about your own group, learn your own cultural and literary heritage, very important, but also explore other cultures as well. So when I was in university, I got my first exposure to African American literature. I went to the University of Georgia, and at that time, there were no what we call Black studies, okay? Students had to really put themselves out there. There weren't many Black students on campus, but they had to really put their needs. Us that were a tiny group of students had to really put the needs out there that we want African American literature. Of course, I did not. I wasn't very vocal about it. Okay, I'm just low key person, and certainly back then when I was much shyer than I am now, I didn't get in on the action. But because of those that were braver, and it ended up that we were able to get African American studies going at the University of Georgia back at that time. I'll be 63 next week, 63 years old. And so, yeah, things have really changed. And, there's a lot of madness out here, but there's also some good things as well. But when they got African American literature instituted in in the department where I was studying. My undergraduate work was in literature, in English. I was an English major for my bachelor's degree. My master's degree is in education, English education. But when they got it into the department at what's called Park Hall, no, was it Park Hall or was it Adderhall? I've forgotten. Okay, I can't remember which one was. I think Park Hall was maybe for where I got my master's, and then Adderhall, I think, was where I did my undergraduate work. Remember, guys, this is back in the 1980s. It's been a long time. But anyway, so they got this started, and the only professor that was willing to teach African American literature was a sort of hippie-ish kind of poet, Dr. Coleman Barks. Okay, some of you may be familiar with him. He does sort of like translations of Rumi, what the Turks call Mevlana. And so Dr. Barks was the only one that was willing to take on African American studies. He did it hesitantly because he felt like, well, as a white man, I don't know whether I can actually just get into really just the essence of African American lit. So Dr. Barks went ahead and got in on the game and started teaching African American lit. And I took it twice. I took African American literature under him and also under Michael Lomax, who had been, at that time, he had been an Atlanta politician. Okay, Michael Lomax. I often wonder what became of him. Used to be all over the news. And I mean, the excitement I had to have a guy that you would see on the news, they would be, interviewing him, and he was a big part of Atlanta's government. He would come over here to where I lived, to the University of Georgia, and teach African American lit. So I took it twice. I took first with Dr. Barks for a grade, and then I had it audited. I audited the class under Michael Lomax. So this is my stack of books. These are all of them that we did in a semester, okay, except for one. One is missing. I couldn't find it, okay, and I'm going to talk about that later, okay. So this is the stack, missing one, okay. It's been years since I've read these, and I'm just going to give like little brief synopsis on each, and I encourage you to read these, okay. Now, for those of you that are looking for African American women writers, there aren't any in this stack. They're all men, okay? Except for there may be some women poets in the poetry book, okay? It may be some women. I have to look back. It might be, but I think most of them are men. So if you are the feminist type, if you're looking for women writers, unfortunately, they're not here. Oh, yeah, there's Nikki Giovanni in here. She died recently. There are a few in this, okay, but I'll talk about this one later. So one of my favorite African-American writers is Zora Neale Hurston, okay? I did a video. If you look down on all my videos, you'll see one that I did on her, I think last year or the year before. Okay. And I also provide the link in the description so that you can, look at the video. It didn't get any thumbs up. Okay. Some views, but apparently people weren't very interested, but I absolutely love Zora Neale Hurston's work. All right. So I'm going to start, I guess, from the top with this, or I think what I'll do, I'm going to tell you about the first book. It'll be easier, okay, because I can't find my copy of it, and I may possibly have given it to somebody else. I don't know, but I looked in books I had in storage. I looked on the shelves. I can't find it, okay. I think I may have given it away. But the first book I want to mention is the autobiography of Malcolm X, okay. I read that one. This was one of them that we had to read. It was As Told, I think it's told to Alex Haley. And it was basically the story of Malcolm X's life from growing up in the South, coming from a background where he saw, brutality. His father was outspoken black man and was probably murdered because he was outspoken and stood up against the white power structure. His mother was, I think, from the Caribbean. She was very fair-skinned, and that's where he got like the red hair and the fair skin from his mother. And his book all of these books had a very profound impact on my awareness, okay? But I'm way more aware now about the situation with racism and that it's a bigger thing than just, it's, of course, with African Americans, we often think that we're the only ones, but this is a worldwide thing, okay? Bigotry and hatred and the tactics that wealthy people use. I was listening to, there's a YouTube channel, Bett Media. One of the, guys that run the, channel is he is, part Algerian and, part Dutch. Okay. Had an Algerian father and Dutch mother. And he's a professor in China. And he was talking about, he has an excellent, his name's Kareem. I forgot his last name, but Kareem, he has a very good understanding about racism, okay? And so with me and everything over the years, this was my start. These books were my start, okay? So, but Malcolm X's autobiography was very, very powerful to me. It made a huge impression on me. And when the movie came out much later, starring Denzel Washington, I just had to go. I had to go. I went to see it. I also... I think I have a copy. I had a copy of it on VHS, but I had to see it. And I just absolutely love the song by Aretha Franklin. So I recommend reading the book first and seeing the movie. Okay, very much a very great lesson. So the first book I'm going to start with is the short fiction of James Baldwin, Going to Meet the Man. These were some short stories by James Baldwin, the American writer James Baldwin. James Baldwin wrote a good many books. Okay, he for a brief while after he got so tired and traumatized by the racism here in the United States, he actually moved to Turkey for a while. He lived in Turkey, and then later on he died in France. Okay, so these are some short stories. Some of them are rather long. There are how many in here? There are, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. These the one that made a big impression on me was This Evening, So Soon. Okay, I think if I'm right, if I can remember correctly, it was set in France, and it basically was looking at the main character was grappling with racism against black people and African Americans. He's basically had put himself in self-imposed exile in France, and he runs across an Algerian man, and he sort of learns that, hey, this is sort of a worldwide thing, how the Algerians were treated and how they were treated in France, and all that. So but I need to go back and read this one because I don't think I read all of the short stories in here. I may have, but I remember this evening so soon. This evening so soon. I was really moved by it. Okay, so one of the great writers, James Baldwin. Okay, the next book is from the Harlem Renaissance. Harlem Renaissance, this book is called The Black and the Berry by Wallace Thurman. Wallace Thurman only wrote a couple of books, I think, and this one was about colorism in the African American community, okay? It's basically the story of Emma Lou. Emma Lou is very black indeed, too black for her own comfort. Victimized by her social climbing family, she runs to Los Angeles and then to Harlem of the 1920s, seeking her identity and discovering her destiny. Rejection by her own race. Because she's too dark. They see her as too dark. Forced to accept menial labor and loveless liaisons, Emma Lou is defenseless against the haunting chimera of intraracial prejudice. She must face her darkest self in order to survive, for black is truth, if not beauty, and it is her only hope. So I really was moved by this one. This is the first time I ever read about colorism in the African American community. I grew up seeing it, all about light skin, long hair, all of that. I grew up seeing it, and I would say in some ways now it's even worse. It's even worse now with the younger generation. So history just lives on. People never learn, okay? And they just actually, in many cases, get worse. But yeah, this was a very moving book, this young woman, about her self-hatred and her willingness to take abuse from a mixed-race black man just because he was handsome, looked like Rudolph Valentino, and she will accept abuse just to be with somebody, okay? So this kind of behavior lives on, okay? All right. The next one is Richard Wright's Native Song. Wallace Thurman, his book, he was in the Harlem Renaissance. So was Richard Wright. And I think Richard Wright was also a part of Chicago Renaissance as well. But Richard Wright wrote Native Son. Native Son is about a young man named Bigger Thomas. And Bigger Thomas is trying to deal with living with racism. I'll read from the back. From the start, Bigger Thomas had been headed for jail. It might have been for petty crime by chance. It was for murder and rape. He was an N-word, okay, in a white man's world. And his crimes horrified the whole of Chicago. Caught up by forces he could neither understand nor control, Bigger found a sense of freedom and identity in acts of violence. So this one was very cliffhanging, really have you on the edge of your seat. Native Son, okay? All right. Another one by Richard Wright is Black Boy. Okay. Black Boy, I liked it as well. Both of them, these are, how would I describe reading these books? Very interesting and painful to read. Okay. Very interesting and painful to read. Okay. So Black Boy, in this once sensational, now classic autobiography, Richard Wright tells us with unforgettable fury and eloquence exactly what he thought and felt as a black boy in the Jim Crow South. Wright grew up with poverty, hunger, fear, and hatred. He lied, stole, and lashed out at those around him. He killed and tortured animals. At 6, he was a drunkard hanging about the taverns. Surly, brutal, cold, suspicious, and self-pitying. He was surrounded on the one side by whites who were either indifferent to him or pitying or cruel, and on the other by Negroes who resented anyone trying to rise above the common lot. Wright's powerful account is at once an indictment, an unashamed confession, a poignant and disturbing record. So this is Richard Wright's autobiographical life of growing up in the South as a black boy. Okay, must read. Okay, the next one is Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison. That was my father. My late father's last name was Ralph. Okay, Ralph Ellison. Invisible Man was, from my remembering of it, poetic, disturbing, all of that. Okay, it basically got the theme is, as a black person, African American, a black person in the United States, or Negro as they said back then, or colored person. I've lived through hearing Negro, us being called Negro, colored people, Afro-Americans, African-American, black. I've seen all of it. I've lived through all of it. I'm 63. I'll be 63 soon. But here is Invisible Man. Basically, the theme of the book is living in the United States. Basically, you are invisible if you are a black person. Okay? You basically don't exist. You are the invisible man. Okay? The next one that we read was Cain by Jean Toomer. Cain was a short little book of short stories, basically interconnected short stories and poems. Very beautiful, very poetic, tragic. It was very unique. Your short stories, you got this interspersed throughout. Here's one, Reapers, Black Reapers with the sound of steel on stones, like cutting the sugar cane or cutting the fields. For sharpening scythes, I see them place the, can I see it? I barely can see it here. See them placing the hones in their hip pockets as a thing that's done, and start their silent swinging one by one. Black horses drive a mower through the weeds, and there a field rat, startled, squealing, bleeds, his belly close to ground. I see the blade, blood-stained, continue cutting weeds and shade. Okay, so they've got these poems interspersed among short stories, and I thought it was very beautiful when I read this about South and mixed race people and racism in the South, but it's very beautiful from what I can remember. Okay, all right, next is Charles W. Chestnut's The Wife of His Youth. Charles W. Chestnut could basically, he was mixed race and he could have passed easily for a white man, okay, but he saw himself as a black man. This is a collection of some of his stories, hilarious, written in black dialect, Southern black dialect. Thinking back, I was thinking the other day, Charles Chestnut and Zora Neale Hurston, very similar type writers. I'll have to wonder, did she sort of get her inspiration from him on some things? But yeah, he used a Southern black dialect, and I just love this book because it reminded me so much of how the old generation, my grandparents, talked. Okay, my favorite two short stories in here were The Wife of His Youth and The Passing of Granderson. The Wife of His Youth was about a black man. He was mixed race, very light skinned, and he is sort of like in the little bourgeois boule group. Okay, what they call the boule group. And he is planning to marry a young woman who's very fair skinned. They're all the mixed race people are like, they're sort of like middle class, and they're like, we all should stick together, you know, have our own group, you know, don't include the darker skinned blacks, and the white people don't really accept us, so let's have our own group. And so he is planning to marry a young woman who is close to his age. I mean, that's not close to his age, a young woman much younger than he is. So he is planning to announce to the group that he's going to marry a young woman. But at the same time, there is an old, dark-skinned black woman that shows up in his neighborhood. And she's looking for her husband. She's been looking for a husband for like several decades. She's an old lady. After the Civil War, she was saying that black people got scattered, and she was looking for a husband. She was married to this very fair-skinned, light-skinned man who was he was a free man, where she was a slave, and she said he was crazy about me, and stuff. And she was telling him her story, and he listened, and he realizes this is the wife of my youth. So he has to change his plans, because his wife is still alive, his dark-skinned wife. The Passing of Grandison is about a slave that, played like, yeah, massa, just like you think that Grandison wasn't very bright. But Grandison was putting on a fake face. Grandison was able to hoodwink his own master and get his freedom. So I loved a lot of humor in here, even despite the racism. It's a lot of humor. The wife of his youth. The last one that I'm going to mention in the group, okay, is James Weldon Johnson, The Autobiography of an Ex-Colored Man. Now, James Weldon Johnson is famous for writing the Negro national anthem, Lift Every Voice and Sing. I don't know at my mother's school, but I think my father, growing up at his school, they sang Lift Every Voice and Sing. That was the Negro national anthem. This was before integration. This was during Jim Crow. I had no idea until I took the course that James Weldon Johnson had actually written a novel. And this is about an African-American man who decides he's going to pass as white. He's very light-skinned, and he decides that I can't get anywhere if I just say, okay, I'm black, and I go along with the program, that I'm not going to get anywhere. So I'm going to pretend I'm white. Okay. For those viewers that are not American, they had a 1-drop rule in the United States. The 1-drop rule was basically that if they found if you had any black ancestry, any suspicion of black ancestry, I don't care how blonde you are, how light skinned, how blue eyed you are considered a black person. Okay, so that's why you would see, I know, like my grandfather, he was mixed race, and some white people actually, I guess, thought that he was one of them. And then there was one man growing up that was a friend of my grandparents. He was even more fair skinned. He looked, he had, the hair, everything. And he married a darker skinned black woman, much darker skinned, and had very light daughters. But yeah, this is probably, this was written, I don't know, maybe before Nella Larson wrote her book Passing, which I plan to read her novella. But this is about this man, how he's going to try to navigate through and hide his identity as a black man, called The Autobiography of an Ex-Colored Man by James Weldon Johnson. So, all right. So yeah, I wanted to share these. And like I said, you don't have to wait until a holiday. You don't have to wait until a special month. Read your heritage. Do these things. I mean, a lot of people, it seems like now, I don't know, maybe people were this way when I was young and I just didn't notice. But it seems like now that people seem to think that they're chained to a month or a holiday. Do these things year round. Okay, do it year round. You don't have to be chained to that. Okay, these things are just random and arbitrary anyway. It's not like it's some gospel and you have to do it and it's from Holy Writ, it's sacred. No, you can have your Black History Month and learn about your heritage and culture anytime. Okay, I plan in the future to share some African authors. I plan on that in the future. I don't know when, but I do plan to share some African authors. Yes, I have read African authors before. I had planned in this video, I was going to mention and show the first book I ever read that by African author was Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe, and maybe I'll talk about that another time. I've actually read it twice. I need to read the whole trilogy of Chinua Achebe's books, starting with Things Fall Apart. But yeah, I just wanted to share this with you. It's been a month, and these books really had a profound impression on me as a young person. And like I said, I have a better understanding of the dynamics of racism and oppression and everything. It still hasn't gone away. I think there are some younger people that are duped into thinking that everything's changed, but very little changes with humanity. Okay, we're seeing, like right now, we're living in a time period with stuff going on. You would think, oh, this is the kind of stuff that went on 700 years ago, 1,000 years ago, and it's going on now. Very little changes with the human condition. I think a lot of people also think because we have the technology now that we've risen above some barbarous behavior, but not so. Okay, so I think these are great books to learn great lessons by, and I highly recommend them. Okay, so at the time, I think probably when I read these books, Zora Neale Hurston's books probably had not been published, because the person who really got her work back on the map was Alice Walker. Alice Walker was the one that really got her back on the map. And I read all of this back in the 80s. Okay, but I just want to share all of these with you, and I encourage you to check them out. Yeah. So once again, thanks again for watching my channel. And for those of you that are new to my channel, welcome. I see I've gotten a few new subscribers and had 1 or 2 comments. And so yeah, feel free to leave comments. I don't get a lot of comments just every blue moon, but don't be intimidated. Leave some comments. And I answered someone the other day that was in Thailand, and I did the video about Four Rains by Kukrit Premont. And this person commented, and I left the comment for you if you didn't see the comment already. So feel free, if you have any questions about literature. I am a literature major. My undergraduate is English, and my master's is English education. And just a very quick introduction. I'm in English. I am an EFL. English is a foreign language teacher. I teach online. I've been teaching online now almost continuously since 2017. I've taught here in the United States. I started out as a 6th grade social studies and English teacher, and then I taught abroad through Peace Corps in Botswana in Southern Africa, and I've also taught in Turkey, the country of Turkey, 3 times. Now I teach mainly adults. At this time, I only have adult learners, and my adult learners that I teach are in the countries right now of Turkey. Majority of my students are in Brazil now. It's shifted: Brazil, Turkey, Japan, China, and Iraq. Okay, Iraq. I have 1 student in Iraq as well. And most of my students are adults, and they tend to be into professions like law and engineering, medicine, things like that. So yeah, teaching. So yeah, that's what I do. And I'm also now officially a freelance writer as well. And I'm an independent author, a self-published author. So of 1 book. Hope to be more, hopefully. Okay. All right. So I'm going to end here. I hope you enjoyed this video and learned something new. So this is Sincere. Until next time.